So next we're going to check out a point light. So I'm going to pause my render so I can move around, and I'm going to bookmark this just by clicking this one little icon so that when I go back in, all I have to do if I want to is just go back to View, Bookmarks, and it'll take me right back to that shot so it lines up. But what I'm going to do for the interior, I have this nice cool lighting outside for an evening setting, and I'm going to create a point light. Now for the interior, I could use a point light, or I could use I could actually use an area light. We'll go over those. But I'm going to take this little guy and I pull it up here. And actually I'll leave it right there so we can see it. Also, so we can see more in this shot, I'm going to click on the little camera icon for a second and increase the angle of view. Let's do this. I'm going to change that to 90 degrees so we actually can squeeze more into our shot. And now I'm going to turn on, and we see that little point light isn't doing anything, but it does look like a more of an evening scene. We have some bounce light coming off of here, but it's kind of creepy. So let's warm that up. So we're going to take this point light and say, well, maybe this is going to be our light here. And then we're going to go into its settings. So, same as the other one. The decay is for when you're rendering outside of Arnold because it doesn't um, quite line up as much in here because Arnold has its own thing going on with light decay. We can turn it on, but we have to do a few things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first go to the Arnold settings. I'm going to increase the exposure. Let's say try 5. No, still not seeing it. 10. Starting to see something. 15. There we go. And then I can come down from there. So that's actually looking kind of cool. And now I can adjust that temperature and warm that up a little bit. That looks nice. Now I'll show you how to tweak that out, but for right now, let's just take a look. If we go back, let's pause this. It chugs. We'll make a bookmark here, and then we'll go back to the other bookmark, the original one. Yeah, I changed the angle so it'll be a little different, but to 90 degrees on the camera. But let's see what happens. So now we have this warm color on the inside and a cool color on the outside. And I like that look where you have this contrast. So we'll go back in, and then we can tweak out the settings in here. Now, one of the interesting things with this is you'll notice as I go to 14, it decays out a lot faster. It's not as bright of a light, which means it's not going as far. It's actually decaying naturally, going away from that light source. Now, if I wanted to have a different method, I would uncheck normalize. And what's going to happen is when I do, let's pause it, and I'm going to say update full scene, and then start it again. And the reason it's dead is because now it's no longer naturally calculating it. I have to increase the radius of the light. And as I start to increase that, now I can manually pull this out of how I want the light to go away from the light source. So this is a good way of being able to adjust that a little more manually, not let Arnold just decide everything for you. But this is basically my radius of it going out. So it's still going to be more intense at the source and then fade as it goes away. But now I have a controller to tell me like that I can tell it how I want it to fade. And sometimes it's a good idea. Let's just type in 1, see what that looks like. And of course, it'll take a second. And I could adjust that, bring it down if I went a little bit darker in there. The shadow density, we could see the shadows here, and as I lower those, you'll see the density is basically, you could think of how intense and strong you want the shadows. So it's a way of lightening them up so I don't have them quite as intense. Let's do that. It's just thinking. There we go. And anytime you see samples, if you're getting artifacting or weird things, usually samples equates to it being, um, you can almost think of it as resolution, even though it's not a literal uh, approximation of it, but it actually is, it's fairly accurate of what it's doing, so it's actually calculating the lighting and the shadows a little bit better. I also have the ability of going under shadows specifically, and I can adjust them here. Whereas even if I wanted like more of a Toy Story look to it, I could actually color the shadows themselves and give them a little bit more of a color. You just have to be careful because it's very easy to make it so that they show up glowy if you're not too careful. So, but I can actually do some tweaks and adjustments that way. So we've got our outside light, we've got our light source there. Let's take a look at some of the other lights that we can actually set up.